Hey everybody, final thoughts. Time for Cities. And folks, I was already excited about this game going in because of the design duo. Phil Walker Harding and Steve Finn. As far as I know, they have never co-designed a game together. And yet these two guys are two of the most prolific and respected and skilled board game designers for what Cities is. A beautiful, fast, elegant and deep Euro-y experience. Both of them just time after time after time knock it out of the park. And so, them combining forces, I was already excited going in. But honestly, I could not in my wildest dreams have anticipated it would turn out this good. Here's the deal, folks. This might make it into my top 10 of the year. It is so good. And this is such an amazing time to be a board game fan, or at least a board game fan for the type of gameplay I enjoy, because, ever since Cascadia, well, actually, I was going to say ever since Cascadia won the Spiel des Jahres, but even before then, publishers have been focusing more and more on ensuring that they've got in their catalog something like Cities, or Cascadia, or Point City, or tiny towns. There's so many of these games that have simple, short, quick rules, a lot of setup variability. Every time you play, you get a different combination of objectives that combine to create different goals that we're chasing after, and smart, elegant gameplay that just zips along lightning fast. And Cities is the latest one of these, and several of these have made it into my top 10s in previous years, and I think Cities might be one of the best ever. And there's a few reasons for that, and I just got to give credit where credit is due. Maybe the biggest, most important one is, and you wouldn't expect it, it's because Phil and Steve, although, I don't know, maybe it wasn't them, maybe they didn't care, maybe it was somebody at DeVere, but somebody, somewhere along the way said, you know what we should do? We should make sure that for every one of these objective cards, there's a name on it. Hey, objective, build more hotels, build more parks, build a livable city. The fact that these are not just, oh, here's your objective, make this arbitrary combination of colors and shapes. Right? Nope. It's like, oh, I understand. I know the yellows are residential because every time they show up, it's either it's a hotel or houses or it's a residential tower. The fact that they went above and beyond and made it feel like, no, I'm actually building. This is my residential tower. Or I've got tons of homes. Or because we're in Mexico City this time and they want a historic downtown, which means keep everything short. Oh, this is my historic downtown of Mexico City. I have not felt the theme come through in a tile-laying city game like this since Suburbia, quite frankly. And that's really saying something, because so often, and I've complained about this in other videos too, the developers just get to do that extra mile. Hey, look at all these cards with all these unique people we have to satisfy, or suburbs we have to build, or whatever, and then it's like, oh, it's just a picture of a thing, or it's just a color, or it's a collection of colors. Go the extra mile, publishers. Let me feel like I'm actually building something real. So there's a story, so that by the time the game is over and I've got my little suburb of Mexico City or Barcelona or Buenos Aires or New York or wherever it might be, I feel like there's a story here. I've actually built something that has thematic consistency. That makes it feel more real. It takes it away from the abstract. And again, there are so many of these games that are really, all the ones I mentioned earlier, they're largely kind of abstractish, but they go above and beyond by doing a good job of putting theme into it. Cascadia did it by ensuring that, hey, the way birds score is fundamentally different than the way bears score, and both of those scoring methodologies seem thematically appropriate for birds versus bears versus fish or whatever. And this is the same thing here. And I so often do not see it in games like Quadropolis, because I love SimCity. I played so much SimCity. My original introduction was on the Super Nintendo, back when I was a Nintendo gameplay counselor, back when I was in college, back in the 90s. And I played that game to death. And then the fact that I got to go on and work on The Sims, the console version of The Sims, and I got to hang out with Will Wright and talk to him about the development of The Sims and SimCity and stuff like that. I have just always loved the idea of building cities because I love cities. And anytime And still, probably some of the most memorable cities I've ever built in board game form were for Suburbia, because Suburbia worked so hard to make the theme come to life. And finally, somebody else is doing the same thing, and my hat's off to them. I think this really elevates the experience that we know what we're building. And again, not just these individual objectives we get, and it's awesome that over the course of the game, you're going to pick up a lot. You're going to have 8 unique objectives by the end of the game that you are trying to fulfill, plus 3 race ones, right? So there's so much flexibility, so much variety. It's going to be pushing you in so many different directions, even though you're only building a tiny little 3x3, suburb of your city or neighborhood in the city. Shades of tiny towns. Again, trying to get so much squeezed into such a tiny area. And then, Devere goes above and beyond by not just saying, hey, how about, okay, here's just the city, but coming with 8 different cities. And the objectives in these cities are tied to the reality of these cities. Like Venice is all about making the Grand Canal, or making bridges, or getting more buildings with overview of the water. The fact that, again, they worked hard to not just make this an abstract collection of mechanisms, but made the theme of developing neighborhoods in real-world cities come to life. They didn't have to do this. And these days, it feels to me like a lot of games wouldn't bother. The number of times, Coimbra, I'm looking at you, but so many other games where the publisher could have gone that extra mile to pull me into the story that the game is telling, to actually give me the tools to let me tell my own story, that I am developing a historic downtown, and I'm giving up a lot of opportunities to keep my buildings low because I'm making the historic downtown of Mexico City. That makes this more meaningful. Human beings respond to stories, and every time publishers just throw away the opportunity to take advantage of that, Reef, I'm looking at you, so many of them, it drives me nuts. So, again, I went into this expecting I was going to think it was the bee's knees, mostly because Phil Walker Harding and Steve Finn, 2 of the industry's best, the undisputed kings of time. For years, I've called, Phil Walker Harding, I'm Steve Finn, the king of the filler. And to be fair, this is a fast game. You are going to grab 8 things 4 times. You're going to grab 32 things to build your little space. And it just zips by so fast. Every turn, there are always 3 things you want to grab, and you got to figure out, okay, of these, what's the most important I get? Well, that one, but only if I can get the other one. Does anybody else want that one? Okay, I might have a shot at getting both of those. Am I going to risk it? Or am I going to go for this, which I know will help me based on what I've already done so far? So tension-filled, so fast, so compelling, the tile laying in this game, because it's dual-layer tile building. I'm laying out my base layer of tiles and then building on top of it. I always love that in games. And but then, again, the story is what elevates this so much. And I love it to pieces. I am a big, big fan, folks, and at this point, I'd be surprised if this doesn't make it into my top 10 games for 2024. An absolutely wonderful little tile layer from Devere, Cities. Although, actually, hold on, folks. Before I go, there is one more thing I should mention. As really nearly flawless as this game is for me and my wife, Jen, there is one major mistake that Devere, the publisher, made. This is not colorblind friendly at all. These days, there is just no good reason, no excuse really, for publishers to not pay attention to the fact that potentially upwards of 10% of their audience cannot easily tell the difference between red and green items. And in this game, where red buildings and green buildings are just all over the place here, it's going to make the game very, very difficult for someone like my good buddy Ruel to play. And come on, publishers, stop messing up with that. As much as I sung your praises, Devere, for doing so many things so well here, you really missed the ball on that. And I couldn't leave without pointing that out. But otherwise, absolutely fantastic gameplay experience. One of my new favorites, Cities. That was the run through, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Have a very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.